My name is Edward Thorne, and 3 months ago, I was adrift, a forgotten figure in the tide of misfortune. At 28, a failed academic pursuit and a lifetime of bad breaks had left me burdened by inescapable debt and a gnawing fear for my younger brother Leo, who was slowly slipping away. The cramped apartment we shared, with its chipped paint and persistent leak, felt less like a home and more like a vessel taking on water. Rent notices piled up by the door, a growing testament to our dwindling funds, like autumn leaves before a harsh winter. Leo, a bright but frail 17, tried his utmost. His modest earnings from organizing dusty archives at the district library were barely enough for his transit, let alone our escalating expenses. Each evening, he returned with strained, weary eyes from poring over archaic texts, yet never uttered a word of complaint. His only question was always whether I'd found anything promising, and my consistent reply was a shake of the head coupled with a whispered vow that the next day would bring change. Then, Leo's condition worsened dramatically. The medical professionals termed it an aggressive form of cognitive erosion, a cruel, rare ailment that systematically stripped him of his memories, his ability to speak, and ultimately his very being. All I truly grasped was that my brother, my sole remaining family, was vanishing before my eyes. Medical bills began to mount, dwarfing the stacks of overdue rent. I scrounged for any work available, cleaning vacant offices late into the night, sorting expired goods at the bustling market, taking grim graveyard shifts at the rundown diner on the city's outskirts. None of it was enough. As I sifted through yet another wave of discouraging rejection emails, my gaze snagged on a peculiar advertisement, a posting for a night archivist at the Cogsworth Chronarium. The remuneration was astonishingly high, nearly triple what other low-end security or clerical jobs offered. The catch? The shift commenced at midnight and concluded at dawn, and the Chronarium itself only operated within these twilight hours. Peculiar, certainly, but desperate circumstances demanded desperate measures. The interview was remarkably brief. Professor Silas Thorne, a tall, gaunt man with piercing features and eyes like polished obsidian, barely spared a glance for my meager resume. Instead, he fixed his gaze on my face, scrutinizing it as if deciphering an ancient map. He posed a single penetrating question: are you capable of maintaining an intricate system without comprehending its fundamental purpose? Yes, absolutely, I asserted, though both of us silently acknowledged the fabrication. Nevertheless, I was hired. He presented me with a heavy leather-bound tome. Within these pages lie the directives. Commit them to memory before your inaugural shift. Divulge their contents to no one. Under no circumstances should this book be lost. Upon thorough memorization, you are to incinerate it. That very night, in the dim light of our kitchen, with Leo's shallow breathing echoing from his room, I unsealed the tome. The pages, thick and cool parchment, felt strangely vital beneath my fingertips. With each directive I read, a growing dread coiled in my gut. These were no ordinary security or archival procedures. They defied any conventional understanding. Yet, the prospect of the first paycheck, enough to cover Leo's crucial specialized treatments for the entire month, was all that truly mattered. My first shift at the Cogsworth Chronarium began a week ago. Now, I fully grasp why the pay is so generous and why the previous 3 archivists departed abruptly, as Professor Thorne had so casually mentioned during my second night. Reason dictates I should resign immediately. Any sane individual would. However, Leo's condition continues to deteriorate, and his experimental therapies demand resources far beyond our means. So, I will persist, night after relentless night, returning to this labyrinthine chronarium that awakens only after midnight. I will continue to adhere to the directives, and I will continue to feign ignorance of the horrors that unfold when one dares to breach them. By daylight, the chronarium appears unremarkable. I've passed it countless times, just another grand Victorian structure adorned with complex clockwork mechanisms visible through its shaded windows. But with the approach of midnight, something within Cogsworth shifts. It's not a discernible alteration, nothing overtly obvious. It's more akin to the building itself, drawing a deep, unseen breath. Tonight marks my 7th shift. I secure my bicycle across the street precisely at 11:45 p.m. Directive 1, adhere strictly to the appointed arrival time, never early, never late. Exactly 15 minutes before midnight, no more, no less. From my saddlebag, I retrieved the articles Professor Thorne provided: a weighty brass key, ancient and cold, a small pouch filled with lustrous silver dust, and a singular, meticulously polished obsidian fragment. My name is etched into one side of the fragment, while the other bears swirling, cryptic glyphs I cannot decipher. Directive 2. The fragment must be worn at all times, with the glyphs facing outward. Under no circumstances should it be touched with bare hands. After crossing the threshold, I don thin leather gloves and carefully pin the obsidian fragment to my lapel, ensuring the mystical symbols are prominently displayed. The night air is crisp as I cross the street, my boots silent on the aged cobblestones. The Chronarium appears inert, its windows dark and opaque. As always, I position myself exactly 10 feet from the main entrance and wait. At the stroke of midnight, the heavy double oak doors swing inward with no visible impetus. Professor Thorne stands within the doorway, his tall, slender frame silhouetted against the faint internal glow. "Good evening, Edward," he intones, his voice resonating like the methodical ticking of an ancient clock. "Any departures from protocol since yesterday?" "No, Professor," I respond, delivering the mandated reply. Directive 3. Should anyone other than Professor Thorne utter your name, you are to offer no response. Do not turn. Do not acknowledge their presence in any manner. Professor Thorne nods curtly and steps aside. Then enter and assume your designated post. Tonight, we conduct a standard calibration. I'm beginning to understand that nothing at Cogsworth is ever truly standard, but I hold my tongue. I step through the threshold, mindful not to graze the intricately carved doorframe. Once inside, Professor Thorne guides me through the expansive main hall. By day, I imagine it as a stately chamber, perhaps filled with orderly display cases and grand timepieces. But under the cloak of night, the display cases reconfigure into a swirling, intricate labyrinth, converging around a central dais marked by a unique, gear-shaped inlay. The magnificent master clock presides at what I perceive to be the northern end of the chamber, its brass components pulsating with an inner luminosity rather than reflecting ambient light. "Take your position," Professor Thorne instructs, indicating a small, elevated console to the right of the master clock. This is where I will remain for the next 6 hours, observing the calibrators as they enter and adhere to their own set of directives, to which I am not privy. My task, ostensibly, is straightforward: observe, abstain from interference, unless specific conditions are met, and meticulously follow my directives. Directive 4. Should the central gear inlay undergo a color transformation, you are to utilize the silver dust to construct a protective circle around yourself, from which you must not emerge until Professor Thorne grants permission. Directive 5. You must depart before the first touch of dawn's light graces the Chronarium. Once outside, under no circumstances are you to glance backward. At precisely 12:30 a.m., the calibrators commence their arrival. They enter in single file, each pausing at the doorway to exchange hushed words with Professor Thorne. He offers a solemn nod to each, and they proceed into the swirling maze of cases. I count silently, making careful tally marks on a small pad. The individuals appear unremarkable, men and women of varying ages, clothed in ordinary attire, devoid of the cloaks or ritualistic garments one might anticipate at such a nocturnal gathering. Yet, there is an unsettling precision to their movements, too methodical, too perfectly synchronized. I arrest my thoughts before uttering any forbidden conjectures. My livelihood depends on this. By 1:0 a.m., 34 individuals have entered. Professor Thorne approaches my console. "Count?" he inquires. 34, I confirm. Correct. A subtle hint of satisfaction crosses his features, a far preferable alternative to his displeasure. Last night, my count was erroneous. I reported 39 when there were only 38. His disappointment was palpable, like a chilling seep of dread into my very bones. He compelled me to recount, patiently indicating each individual until my mistake became agonizingly clear. I will not repeat that error. The calibration commences with Professor Thorne positioned at the central gear inlay. He recites in a language wholly unfamiliar to me, unlike any Latin or ancient ecclesiastical tongue I've ever encountered. The calibrators respond in unison, their voices coalescing into a resonant hum that sets my inner ear throbbing. I concentrate on the rhythm of my breathing, on the cool, steady weight of the obsidian fragment against my chest. My first night, This segment nearly rendered me unconscious. Now, I anticipated, bracing myself. At 2:17 a.m., a palpable shift occurs. A profound silence descends upon the calibrators. Professor Thorne retreats from the central inlay, and an individual from the gathering steps forward, an elderly man with sparse, wispy white hair and deeply set eyes. The inlay retains its normal hue, so I remain motionless. The man kneels at the center, places both hands firmly on the inlay, and begins to speak. His voice resonates differently from the others, deeper, carrying an echoing quality that seems detached from the chronarium's acoustics. As he speaks, the air grows dense and heavy. My breath forms faint, ephemeral wisps, though no one else's does. I perform another nervous count of the calibrators. Still 34. Good. The man rises, his message evidently delivered. Professor Thorne nods and turns to face the assembly. Tonight, we anticipate a visitor, he announces in English. As is our custom, we shall pose a query. This is an unprecedented development. My fingers instinctively tighten around the pouch of silver dust in my pocket. The main doors creak open again, though no sound of knocking preceded it. A figure stands within the doorway, tall and cloaked in a dark, flowing garment that seems to absorb all ambient light. From my vantage point, their face remains indistinct. Enter and disclose your presence, Professor Thorne commands. The visitor steps inside, the doors behind them close with a soft, mournful groan of ancient wood. As they advance toward the center, I observe that their footsteps produce no sound whatsoever on the stone floor. A prickling sensation of warning spreads across my skin. The visitor reaches the center and stands upon the gear inlay. In the faint illumination, I can now discern their face. Utterly unremarkable, the kind one forgets, mere moments after seeing. But their eyes, I avert my gaze instantly. Present your query, Professor Thorne directs the visitor. The visitor offers a faint, unsettling smile. I seek the entity burdened with unwound time. The calibrators stir, murmuring amongst themselves. Professor Thorne raises a hand, and silence descends once more. We acknowledge your query. The response shall be revealed when the cycle demands it. The visitor nods, then sweeps their gaze across the chamber. Their stare momentarily passes over me, and it requires every ounce of my willpower to suppress a flinch. For a fleeting instant, I imagine they will approach me, and my hand instinctively tightens around the obsidian fragment. Instead, they point to a young woman positioned within the second tier of display cases. You. The young woman rises, visibly trembling. I... Bring her forth, Professor Thorne commands, and two calibrators escort the trembling woman to the central inlay. What transpires next compels me to bite my tongue so fiercely that I taste blood. The visitor places both hands gently, almost tenderly, on the young woman's temples. Then, they begin to whisper into her ear, their words too soft for anyone else to discern. The young woman's expression cycles from terror to bewilderment, then to a state of peaceful emptiness. When the visitor withdraws their hands, the young woman's face is serene, though her eyes appear vacant. It's quiet now, she whispers, a faint, unsettling smile gracing her lips. The visitor nods, then turns to Professor Thorne. Our transaction is complete. Professor Thorne inclines his head slightly. Until the next appointed cycle. The visitor departs as they arrived, the doors opening and closing without intervention. Once they are gone, a collective exhalation ripples through the calibrators. The calibration resumes as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. The young woman returns to her position, still bearing that faint, disquieting smile, occasionally touching her temples where the visitor's hands had rested. At 3:00 a.m., Professor Thorne announces a recess. The calibrators file into a concealed room behind the master clock, a chamber into which I am expressly forbidden entry. Left solitary in the main hall, I seize the opportunity to stretch my aching limbs, careful not to stray from my console. My back protests fiercely from the prolonged stillness. I check my antique analog watch out of ingrained habit, though I know it is useless here. The chronarium's intrinsic mechanisms invariably disrupt all modern electronics. Edward. I freeze. Someone has uttered my name, yet it was not Professor Thorne. Directive 3 instantly takes hold. Offer no response. Do not turn. Do not acknowledge. Edward, I know you can hear me. The voice emanates from my left, near the main entrance. It sounds precisely like Leo. No, that is impossible. Leo is safely at home, in bed, hopefully granted a night of respite from his pain. Your brother needs you, Edward. His condition is worsening. My heart thunders in my chest, yet I fix my gaze on the master clock ahead, rigidly refusing to turn. This auditory illusion has occurred before, though with the voice of my deceased mentor, not Leo's. It must be a test. It has to be. Look at me, Edward, just for a moment. I clench my jaw, repeating Directive 3 like an incessant mantra in my mind. The voice, so eerily like Leo's, emits a soft sigh. As you wish. But remember this. When he is gone, you chose this place over him. The words strike me with the force of a physical blow, yet I maintain my rigid posture. Eventually, the voice falls silent. When the calibrators file back in at 3:30 a.m., I perform another count. 34, all accounted for. Professor Thorne grants me an approving nod as he passes my console. Did he orchestrate this test? Was it his doing? His expression remains inscrutable. The remainder of the calibration proceeds without incident. Strange, guttural recitations in that alien language, moments of profound, unnerving silence that stretch interminably, and finally, at 5:45 a.m., the concluding writes, Professor Thorne once again stands at the central gear inlay. We have been acknowledged. We have been heard. We have upheld our temporal covenant for another night. We have been heard, the calibrators echo. The covenant endures. One by one, they file out, each offering a perfunctory nod to Professor Thorne as they pass. I count again, 34 departing, no one left behind, no uninvited additions. By their standards, a successful night. As the final calibrator exits, Professor Thorne approaches my console. You performed admirably tonight, Edward, especially with the voice. So, he was aware. Thank you, Professor. Your learning curve is impressive, far superior to your predecessors. He studies my face intently. How fares your brother? The question catches me off guard. I have never mentioned Leo to him. He is managing, Professor. I see. He reaches into his pocket and produces a heavy canvas sack. Your remuneration for the week. A bonus is included. I accept the sack, surprised by its unexpected heft. Thank you. Tomorrow night will be different, he states, his eyes holding mine. A unique collection. Pay particular heed to Directive 4. A knot of dread tightens in my stomach, but I nod. I will be prepared. Good. You are now dismissed. Remember Directive 5. Professor Thorne offers a faint smile, an expression that fails to reach his eyes. Until tomorrow night, Edward. I tuck the canvas sack into my jacket pocket and proceed toward the exit, detaching my obsidian fragment as I walk. The doors swing open, and I step out into the pre-dawn gloom. The Chronarium grounds are silent, deserted. My bicycle rests where I left it across the street. As I walk away, every instinct screams at me to glance back, to witness what the Chronarium transforms into as night yields today. But I keep my gaze fixed forward, remembering the fate of the archivist before me who violated that directive. Professor Thorne had been vague about the specifics, but his casual description of finding their empty uniform on the Chronarium steps conveyed enough. I reach my bicycle, mount it, and pedal away, the canvas sack a weighty presence in my pocket. Tonight, I will be able to make another installment payment for Leo's treatment. Tonight, he might find a little more peace in his sleep. And tomorrow, I will return to Cogsworth for the special collection, whatever dreadful meaning that holds. Because even amidst all the bewildering directives, all the unsettling occurrences, all the profound dread that seizes me when those doors creak open at midnight, this cursed employment is sustaining my brother's life. For that, I must face whatever lies within that Chronarium. I have no other choice. I found little solace in sleep after last night's shift. Leo was awake upon my return, his eyes distant, his pain preventing rest. I administered his medication and remained by his side until he finally drifted off around noon. The canvas sack from Professor Thorne contained more funds than anticipated, enough to cover next month's treatment as well. As I tallied the bills, a small, intricately carved wooden keepsake fell out, warm to the touch. No accompanying note, no explanation. I almost discarded it, but an inexplicable instinct compelled me to pocket it instead. After a few hours of restless slumber, I awoke to check on Leo. He seemed better today. a faint flicker of lucidity in his eyes. The new medicine must be proving effective. I deliberately withheld any mention of the Chronarium or its peculiar directives. He believes I work routine night shifts at a logistics warehouse. It's better that way. As evening descends, I prepare for my impending shift. The concept of the special collection, as alluded to by Professor Thorne, has set my nerves on edge. I meticulously double-check my equipment. Fragment, silver dust, gloves. I add a small, hand-crank lantern, though I've never had cause to use it inside the Chronarium. Its interior is perpetually bathed in that dim, ticking luminescence, seemingly emanating from everywhere and nowhere. The wooden keepsake rests on my bedside table. On an impulse, I tuck that into my pocket as well. I arrive at the Cogsworth Chronarium at precisely 11:45 p.m. Tonight, the building possesses a subtly altered appearance. I cannot articulate how, but something about its very structure feels more sentient, more ancient. I dismiss the unsettling thought and cross the street, positioning myself 10 feet from the main entrance. The doors open punctually at midnight, but Professor Thorne is absent. Instead, an elderly woman stands in the doorway, small and frail, with wispy white hair neatly confined by a simple ribbon. I recognize her from the calibrators always observed within the innermost swirl of display cases. "Edward Thorne," she intones, her voice like the dry whisper of interlocking gears. "Enter and assume your post." I hesitate. This deviates from the established routine, and routine at Cogsworth seems paramount. Yet, Directive 1 speaks only of my arrival time, not the identity of my greeter. "Where is Professor Thorne?" I inquire. "Engaged in preparations," she replies, offering no further detail. "The unique collection demands his undivided attention. I am Elder Lyra Frost. I shall guide you tonight." I enter, maintaining a cautious distance as I pass her. Inside, the Chronarium appears utterly transformed. The swirling display cases have vanished, replaced by a single orderly row of empty, polished pedestals lining the walls. The central gear inlay emits a faint glow, not a change in color, but a pulsating inner light. "What manner of collection is this?" I ask, my fingers instinctively brushing the silver dust pouch in my pocket. Elder Lyra Frost offers a thin, mirthless smile, a communion with a visitor who has expressed particular interest in our temporal ledger and in you. My stomach plummets. "In me?" "Your post is there," she indicates my usual console. The directive remain unchanged, though tonight you may find Directive 4 of particular relevance. Should the gear inlay undergo a color transformation, you are to utilize the silver dust to construct a protective circle around yourself from which you must not emerge until Professor Thorne grants permission. I assume my position, feeling profoundly exposed without the presence of the calibrators to divert attention from me. The Chronarium is empty save for Elder Lyra Frost, who takes a seat near the main door. "When will the others arrive?" I ask. "There are no others tonight, only those essential for the communion." At 12:30, the main doors creak open once more. Professor Thorne enters, trailed by 4 calibrators whom I recognize from previous nights. They are cloaked in dark garments adorned with shimmering, stitched symbols, the very glyphs etched upon my obsidian fragment. "Edward?" Professor Thorne acknowledges me with a nod. "You have met Elder Lyra Frost?" "Yes, Professor." "Excellent. Tonight's service is indeed special, as I conveyed. A visitor has articulated a specific desire to meet you." "Me? Why?" Professor Thorne disregards my question. "The directives are your shield, Edward. Remember them." The group positions themselves around the central gear inlay, forming a precise pentagonal configuration. Professor Thorne begins to speak in that peculiar language, his voice resonating with a power I have never witnessed. The others respond, their voices merging into a discordant sound that causes my ears to pop. The inlay's glow intensifies. I clutch the railing of my console, suddenly overwhelmed by dizziness. The wooden keepsake in my pocket feels intensely warm even through my clothing. I lose all sense of time as the chanting continues. Time itself feels fluid, unmoored within the Chronarium, and acutely so tonight. Eventually, Professor Thorne ceases and directs his gaze squarely at me. Our visitor draws near. What is offered cannot be reclaimed. What is promised must be delivered. The others echo, their voices unnervingly synchronized. What is promised must be delivered. This time, The doors do not open. Instead, the very air within the center of their pentagonal formation shimmers and warps. There is no other way to describe it, as if a sheet of glass is being twisted. The space above the inlay bends inward, creating an aperture where none should exist. From this shimmering void emerges the same visitor from last night, the one with the indistinct face and the eyes I could not bear to meet. They wear the identical dark flowing coat, moving with the same uncanny silence. "We extend our welcome," Professor Thorne pronounces, bowing slightly. The visitor nods. I have come for my response, as agreed. Professor Thorne gestures toward me, the one burdened with unwound time. My body goes cold. The visitor turns to face me, and this time I find myself utterly unable to break eye contact with their gaze. Dark, swirling abysses that seem to recede into infinity, like staring down a lightless well. "Edward Thorne," the visitor intones, my name a sibilant whisper of decaying parchment. "Do you comprehend the burden of time you carry?" My mouth is parched. I do not. "Your brother draws breath because others have been forgotten." The words strike me as nonsensical, yet at a deeper, primal level, I grasp their horrific meaning with perfect clarity. Leo's treatments, the groundbreaking experimental drug that is restoring him, how was it developed? Who were the nameless test subjects who preceded him? The visitor advances toward my console. Every fiber of my being screams to flee, but I am paralyzed. "I reclaim lost moments," they continue. "Yours is now due." The gear inlay transforms, its dull brass turning a sickly, pulsating green, like the color of stagnant, decaying water. Directive 4 snaps into horrifying reality. I fumble desperately with the pouch of silver dust, my fingers clumsy with terror. The visitor is now at the foot of my console's steps, extending a hand that suddenly appears unnaturally elongated, its fingers tapering into slender, clockwork-like digits, unlike any human appendage. I pour the silver dust, forming a protective circle around myself, my hands trembling so violently that I almost spill the entire contents in one spot. The visitor halts at the very edge of my silver circle, their head tilting, an unsettlingly mechanical gesture. "A boundary," they murmur, a hint of amusement in their voice. How quaint. Professor Thorne approaches, taking a position beside the visitor. The debt can be transferred as previously discussed. Another may assume his place. The visitor's gaze remains fixed upon me. The original debtor possesses a potent resonance, but I will accept a substitute of equivalent temporal value. "Well, Edward," Professor Thorne inquires, "will you discharge your debt, or shall another bear its cost for you?" The question hangs heavy in the air, a suffocating weight. If I step outside this circle, the visitor will undoubtedly claim me, transporting me to a destination unknown, from which I profoundly doubt I would ever return. If I refuse, someone else will pay in my stead. Someone else will fade into obscurity, just like the archivist who came before me. "What transpires if I settle this debt?" I ask, desperately attempting to buy time. The visitor smiles, revealing a disconcerting array of teeth, too sharp, too numerous, too perfectly aligned. "Your brother lives, your debt is expunged, the temporal balance is re-established." "And if someone else pays?" "Your debt persists. It proliferates. Your brother's memories continue to erode. The balance demands rectification." I envision Leo finally showing signs of improvement after months of suffering. I recall the chilling fate of the archivists who preceded me. Were they confronted with the same agonizing choice? My hand instinctively closes around the wooden keepsake in my pocket, the one from the canvas sack. It pulses with a cool, steady rhythm against my palm, yet I maintain my grip. A powerful, unyielding instinct tells me of its profound importance. There must be an alternative, I assert, directing my gaze at Professor Thorne. His expression remains impassive. An alternative always exists, but every path carries a cost. What is the cost of this? I pull out the wooden keepsake. The reaction is instantaneous. The visitor hisses, recoiling sharply. Professor Thorne's eyes widen in genuine shock. "Where did you acquire that?" he demands. "It was in my payment sack." "You didn't place it there?" Professor Thorne glances at Elder Lyra Frost, who imperceptibly shakes her head. The visitor speaks, their voice now a grating, harsh sound. "A counter-resonance! Interference has occurred!" I gaze down at the keepsake in my palm, It pulses with a calm, steady light, synchronizing with the glowing gear inlay, creating a soothing rhythm akin to a slow, deliberate heartbeat. "Edward," Professor Thorne says cautiously, "that keepsake is exceedingly dangerous. Relinquish it to me, and we can proceed as originally intended." But the visitor continues to retreat, their gaze transfixed on the wooden object. Their sudden fear ignites a flicker of courage within me. "What does it do?" I ask. "It anchors," the visitor snarls. "It roots. It defies." Professor Thorne takes a tentative step toward my circle. "Edward, please, you do not comprehend the power you wield."